It was the end of the 1980s. The wall still divided Berlin, but on the circuits of West Germany, another battle was taking shape. Dirtier, louder, faster. The Deutsche Tourenwagenmeisterschaft, or simply DTM, was in its most brutal phase, where streetcars were distilled into aerodynamic weapons and launched like projectiles between walls, guardrails, and trance-like crowds. And it was into this vortex of speed and national pride that the 190E Evolution II was born, not as a car, but as a declaration of war. The Mercedes-Benz 190E didn't start out as a threat. It was just another compact sedan, designed to take executives in gray suits from the office to the golf course. But the calm was a disguise. In the metal belly of that W201 chassis lay a secret project, orchestrated by old-school engineers from Sindelfingen, driven by resentment and ambition. BMW reigned supreme on the racetrack with the M3 E30, and that was unacceptable to Daimler-Benz. Revenge had to be calculated to the millimeter. The first spark came with the 190E 2.3-16, designed with the help of British Cosworth, but it wasn't enough. Then came the 2.5-16, then the Evolution White, culminating in 1990, when Mercedes unveiled to the world a monster of black fiber and metallic fury, the 190E 2.5-16 Evolution Kuchen. A long name, yes, because it wasn't just a car. It was an invocation ritual, a curse on the tracks of Europe. Every curve of its body seemed sculpted in wind tunnel and vengeance. The redesigned front bumper sliced through the air like a razor, while the rear spoiler, absurdly large by the standards of the time, looked like it had been ripped from a Luftwaffe fighter. The Evo II wasn't pretty. It was intimidating, a warning to those who dared to share the track with it. This Mercedes won't make way. It will smash you into the concrete. The homologation required Mercedes to produce at least 500 examples for the streets. They produced 502. Each painted in metallic blue Bläu-Schwarz, each carrying under the hood a heart that beat at 7,700 revolutions per minute. This engine, developed to withstand the hell of the DTM, didn't tolerate mediocrity. It was an inline four-cylinder, 2.5 liters, with double overhead camshafts and an intake system more sensitive than a German driver's ego. But the story of the Evo II can't be told with numbers and technical data. It begins in the cold early hours of the Hockenheim pits, when the mechanics plunged oil-smeared hands into the soul of the machine, adjusting every screw as if they were preparing a gladiator, and then onto the streets of Frankfurt, where the civilian specimens were driven with the same arrogance as an aristocrat carrying a dagger under his coat. This car didn't ask permission. It commanded respect with the metallic rumble of the M102 E25/2 engine, spitting out low notes that resounded off the glass walls of city buildings. In the wrong hands, it was violent. In the right hands, it was unbeatable. And it was precisely this dichotomy that turned it into a legend. But to understand how the Evo II Hurvertot emerged from the shadows of the pits to become one of the most provocative icons in automotive history, you have to dig deeper. You need to know the details of its construction, the limits of its performance, and the ghosts it carries with it through every corner taken at the limit. If the 190E Evolution II was a predator, its soul lay in the cast iron block that pulsed under the hood. A four-cylinder that, in theory, might seem timid, but which, in practice, spat fire into the street. The code for this heart was M102 E25/2, and every component had been redesigned with almost pathological obsession. Nothing escaped the logic of performance. Nothing was superfluous. Every gear had a mission. This engine delivered 232 horsepower at exactly 7,700 revolutions per minute. But it wasn't just the number that was impressive. It was the way it got there. It sped up like a blade cutting through the night, merciless, savage, without hesitation. The Cosworth redesigned cylinder head used 4 valves per cylinder, with hand-polished intake ducts, and the crankshaft was forged, prepared to withstand hellish journeys on a closed circuit. The Gatrag 5-speed manual gearbox, with short shifting and the classic dogleg layout, where first gear is isolated down and to the left, was not made for beginners. It was a gearbox made for those who knew where they wanted to go. Every gear change required precision and cold blood. The slightest mistake, and the car would respond brutally. And then there was the suspension, the Evo II's dirtiest secret. Mercedes installed a self-leveling hydropneumatic system on all four wheels. Yes, it was a sedan with adaptive suspension in 1990. At high speed, the car automatically lowered about 0.4 inches, optimizing the center of gravity, reducing drag, and increasing grip. Did that make a difference? It made more than a difference. It made history. The wheels, forged by OZ Racing, were 17 inches, something daring for the time. Shod with ultra-low profile tires, they looked like blades spinning under the asphalt, and behind them, a brake system with ventilated discs and reinforced calipers, inherited directly from the racing version. It wasn't a friendly setup. The Evo II was unforgiving when it came to braking. It didn't accept trajectory errors. Either you gave in completely or it threw you into the guardrail. The aerodynamics were more than just a piece of design. Every air intake, every crease in the bodywork, every centimeter of the gigantic rear aerofoil had a specific function. The Evo II's drag coefficient was 0.29, a figure worthy of modern sports cars, obtained not on computers, but in wind tunnels and late-night sessions with exhausted and proud engineers. With this, the car accelerated from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.7 seconds and set a top speed of 158 miles per hour. But statistics don't explain the feeling. The Evo II wasn't about numbers. It was about instinct. Driving this car was like holding a chainsaw with both hands. Powerful, but unpredictable. It demanded trust, but gave no forgiveness. Inside the cabin, there was no exaggerated luxury. The dashboard was functional, with analog instruments and enveloping Recaro seats. The thick, three-spoke steering wheel felt like an instrument of war. Sound insulation was minimal. All the car wanted was for you to hear the engine, feel the vibration in the floor, and understand that comfort wasn't the priority here. It was control, dominance, speed. The Evo II was made to devour curves at the Nürburgring, but also to travel between Frankfurt skyscrapers, always with the same menacing presence. It was a gray wolf walking among trained shepherds, and its engineering reflected that, a union between surgical precision and sheer brutality. It was the height of the Cold War, but Germany's loudest conflict didn't take place across political borders. It happened inside the DTM circuits, and there, between the scream of the engines and the smell of burning rubber, the 190E Evolution II wasn't just another competitor. It was an entity. A shadowy presence with aluminum wings, gliding with lethal precision, and leaving behind a trail of controlled destruction. The year was 1992. The setting was the DTM, Deutsche Tourenwagen-Meisterschaft, the most violent, technical, and competitive touring championship the world had ever witnessed. And the stage couldn't have been more symbolic. Norrisring, Nürburgring, Hockenheim, Zolder. Tracks where thousandths of a second decided not just victories, but entire reputations. Mercedes had spent years sharpening its weapons. With the Evo I, it had already managed to upset BMW, but it was with the Evo II that they stuck their teeth into the competition's neck. The racing version was an even wilder beast than the homologated one. The engine, prepared by AMG, reached 400 horsepower, spinning at over 9,000 revolutions per minute. The rear-wheel drive, combined with the Hewland sequential gearbox and Michelin slicks, turned the Evo II into a cannon on wheels. The body was made of ultralight panels, and the suspension was recalibrated to withstand extreme lateral forces. The car scraped the asphalt in the corners, with sparks coming out from under the chassis, as if each lap was a session of mechanical exorcism. And the rumble was pure German metal, screaming in absolute fury. But what made the Evo II so feared wasn't just its power or its aggressive looks. It was the way it behaved in a race. Unlike the more nervous BMW M3 E30, the Mercedes seemed serene. But that serenity was just the surface. When the driver demanded it, the Evo II reacted like a scalpel bathed in dynamite, precise and destructive. In the 1992 season, the Evo II, driven by Klaus Ludwig, became a legend. It didn't just win races, it humiliated its opponents. It passed on the straights as if it ignored air resistance, and in the corners, it seemed to bend the laws of physics. Ludwig used the car as an extension of his own instincts. His style was cold, clinical, almost robotic, and that suited the Mercedes' behavior perfectly, a predator that never lost focus. Alongside Ludwig, names like Bernd Schneider and Kurt Thiem completed the three-pointed star team, and together they turned the Evo II into an obsession for their rivals. Audi and BMW tried to fight back, but it was like throwing stones at a jet fighter. Mercedes' supremacy was so uncomfortable that it began to attract the attention of the Federation. Protests were inevitable. BMW claimed that the Evo II exploited loopholes in the regulations with its exaggerated aerodynamics. Audi accused Mercedes of obtaining favors behind the scenes. And the public was divided. Half cheered fervently. The other half screamed for justice. But no one, absolutely no one, could ignore what was happening on the track. The Evo II was becoming a classic villain, the one you hate because you know you can't beat it. A gray, angular sedan that came out of nowhere at your rear, stuck to your bumper like a predator ready to pounce, and then disappeared around the next bend, leaving nothing but dust, smoke, and wounded pride. 1992 ended with Mercedes as champions, but what remained was not just the trophy. It was the legacy of a machine that used the rules to its advantage, that turned German coolness into brutal performance, and that paved its fame with the bones of its opponents. When Mercedes-Benz put the 502 street-legal 190E Evolution II on sale, it wasn't selling cars. It was selling danger. They were legal vehicles, yes, but absolutely outside any convention of common sense. The engineers had designed the Evo II for the track, and, by some dark whim of Daimler's, they decided that this same projectile should be offered to the civilian public. The result, a kind of creature disguised as a sedan, began to circulate on the streets of Germany, France, England, and Switzerland. The look of the Evo II said it all. The giant airfoil, the 17-inch wheels, the lowered bodywork, and the dark paintwork immediately struck a chord. It wasn't a car. It was a warning. Many mistook it for prototypes or illegal vehicles, and in some countries, the Evo II's aggressive appearance led to direct intervention by the law. In Switzerland, for example, the road police even stopped owners of the model on allegations of factory alterations, even though the Evo II was delivered exactly as it was by Mercedes. In France, some cities started arbitrarily inspecting cars with airfoils of that size, in clear provocation of the model. In London, meanwhile, there were those who called the Evo II the A-road terrorist, an allusion to its hostile stance and its unmistakable noise cutting through the tunnels and viaducts of the city center. The noise was another point of contention. The Evo II's exhaust system, although technically within legal limits, emitted such a low, metallic sound that it provoked constant complaints. In upscale neighborhoods, it was common to see anonymous letters stuck to windshields, with veiled threats or polite requests for the owners to not drive this racing car around here anymore. But the Evo II didn't want to be accepted. It wanted to be feared, and it succeeded. Its presence was so imposing that many private parking lots and garages in luxury buildings simply banned its entry, not because of its size, not because of any real risk, but because of image. It carried with it the symbolic weight of violence, of uncontrolled speed, of the automotive rebellion that the 1990s were trying to repress in the name of a new, cleaner, quieter, more civilized Europe. In Germany, where it was to be treated as a national hero, the Evo II divided opinion. Brand purists saw the car as a misrepresentation of the Mercedes-Benz spirit. For them, the Evo II was noisy, arrogant, and juvenile, an affront to the restrained luxury and reserved prestige that have always defined the brand. Young people, enthusiasts, and urban rebels, on the other hand, saw it as a cult object, something you couldn't just buy with money, but with conviction. And there was also the criminal component. Like so many other high-performance cars, the Evo II began to attract attention from the wrong circles. In cities such as Hamburg, Milan, and Barcelona, some examples ended up in the hands of criminal organizations who saw the model's performance and mechanical discretion as an ideal tool for quick getaways and symbolic intimidation. It was not uncommon to see headlines such as "High-performance Mercedes involved in chase," and whenever the car in the report was an Evo II, the newspapers emphasized the model, as if the machine itself were an accomplice to the crime. This generated a dangerous fascination. At clandestine car shows, the Evo II was treated as a relic. No one dared to touch it. It was the automotive equivalent of a hot firearm. When one of these came along, the other vehicles fell silent in respect. Its rumble was a sermon, its aesthetics a prophecy. Over time, many owners began to hide their Evo II in closed garages, out of sight, to avoid vandalism or persecution. The model, although very rare, disappeared from the streets. Not out of disinterest, but out of fear. It had crossed the fine line between respect and intimidation. It became a silent legend, whispered among collectors, feared by those who didn't understand it. And perhaps that's precisely what made him eternal. The Evo II wasn't made to be loved. It was made to be remembered, not for the smoothness of its handling, but for the impact it had, like thunder that doesn't hit, but scares. Time tends to erode everything: cars, memories, reputations. But there are exceptions. There are machines that refuse to age, that defy rust, obsolescence, and oblivion with the same fury with which they cross curves at 150 miles per hour. The Mercedes-Benz 190E 2.5-16 Evolution 2 is one of these temporal aberrations. It didn't become scrap metal. It became an altar. More than 3 decades have passed since the first examples left the assembly line in Bremen. Since then, the world has spun faster. Engines have become quieter. Brands have bent to comfort and efficiency. But the Evo II was never part of that world. It stood still in time, or rather, outside of it. An artifact of an era when motoring was still confused with war, and when a car could be more than a means of transportation. It could be a manifesto. Today, it is worshipped as an entity. At specialized auctions, an Evo II in original condition easily exceeds the $500,000 mark. But the value goes beyond the financial. It has become a symbol, an amulet for enthusiasts who refuse to forget what motorsport once was. In closed clubs, collectors exchange information as if they were talking about historic weaponry. How many original kilometers? Which chassis? What was the production number? Do you have the homologation documents? Does the airfoil still have the factory seal? The reverence for the Evo II is almost religious, and no wonder. Each copy is a time capsule, not just because of its rarity, but because of the philosophy it carries: uncompromising engineering, unashamed design, unfiltered performance. It's the absolute opposite of today's logic, where everything is digitized, calibrated, diluted, with layers of electronic assistance. The Evo II has no driving modes. It has no regenerative brakes. It has no excuses. On social media, videos of the model have accumulated millions of views. One of them, recorded on a rainy early morning in Tokyo, shows an Evo II crossing a tunnel with the engine screaming until it cuts out, under the neon and steam of the wet asphalt. The metallic sound reverberates as if the past were trying to tear the present apart. And in the comments, thousands of people, of all ages and languages, repeat the same thing. That's the sound that's missing from today's cars, and it is. Mercedes, aware of the cultural impact of the Evo II, tries to pay homage to it in campaigns and special models. But the truth is that they've never managed to replicate its essence. Not the C63 Black Series, Not even the most aggressive versions of the current models come close to the rawness that made the Evo II so dangerous and unforgettable. Because what defines the 190E EVO II cannot be emulated, only experienced. Even in video games and simulators, the Evo II appears as a rare piece. In titles such as Gran Turismo and Forza Motorsport, it is portrayed with almost documentary accuracy. And it's always a difficult car to drive. It demands control. It demands respect. It charges dearly for any overconfidence, just like in real life. Culturally, it is also infiltrated where least expected. In urban music in Germany, for example, the Evo II has become a lyrical reference in tracks by rappers who grew up hearing stories about the car and dreaming of the roar of the engine in the alleys of Berlin. In independent films and fashion commercials with an industrial aesthetic, it appears as an element of contrast, pure brutality set against a backdrop of urban decay. The Evo II became an image. It became noise. It became a legend. And legends don't die. They just become quieter until someone starts the engine again. It's not just the end of a story. It's the beginning of an oath, because the Mercedes-Benz 190E 2.5-16 Evolution 2 wasn't made to sleep in humidity-controlled garages under silk covers and soft lights. It wasn't shaped to be static. The Evo II was born in friction, in scream, in speed. It was forged to challenge limits, and above all, to remind the world of what a machine made without fear is capable of. There is an inherent melancholy when contemplating a stationary Evo II. Its angular headlights, like eyes attentive even without energy. The airfoil, waiting for the wind like immobile wings. It carries something that modern supercars have lost: intent. It's not just fast. It's ferocious. It's not just rare. It's necessary. A reminder that there was a time when the industry dared to put engineering rage on the streets. A time when cars weren't just products. They were postures. The Evo II is the opposite of conformity. There's nothing right about it. The look is too aggressive. The engine is too noisy. The behavior is too unpredictable. It wasn't designed to please. It was designed to intimidate. And that's why, even today, even among modern monsters with 1,000 horsepower and touchscreen steering, it remains relevant. It is the cry of the mechanic who has accepted no limits. It's the tense silence of the driver before the start. It's the restrained breathing of the driver on the blind bend, when the world seems suspended for half a second. It's the sound that's missing from the sterilized avenues. It's the gear that hasn't been engaged. It's the spark that doesn't want to die. And if you've come this far, maybe you feel it too. Maybe you carry the same restlessness inside you. Perhaps you can still hear, even faintly, the echo of a Cosworth four-cylinder tearing through the gray German sky, spitting fire from the valves and leaving behind everything that is warm, safe, and predictable. The 190E EVO II doesn't want applause. It wants followers. It wants disciples who refuse the silence of domesticated cars, who celebrate friction, who smell burnt oil like perfume, who understand that the real legacy is not in museums, but in those who dare to start the engine and move forward, even when the whole world seems to say otherwise.